Hi, this is Sandy from Closure and Acceptance, and I want to thank you for stopping by to watch my video. And today it is a video biography on myself and what it's like growing up Native American in the white society, being adopted, and what it was like for me being a medium, as well as the 60s scoop. I want to make this video today because I want people to understand what it's like for me. Obviously, I'm Native American, and what it was like growing up in the white society and all the difficulties emotionally that I had endured, in my head of, how hard it is. Some people look at my life thinking, oh, Sandy has it so good. Sandy, had a good upbringing. Sandy, just all that. But inside, I had a lot of emotional issues, because obviously I knew that I was different from my adoptive parents, because obviously they're white and they're American and I am not. So that is one reason why I want to do it. And also too, I want to talk about what it's like growing up being a medium, how isolating that is, and just what it was like for me, as well as finding out about the 60 scoop and being a part of something that was so tragic throughout my country of Canada. And I wanted to talk about that a bit and for people to hear my side, even though I am Native, but I obviously grew up in the white society, and I just wanted to talk about that so people could understand what it's like. What I'm hoping to accomplish with this video biography, like I had stated just a moment ago, is that people do look at my life thinking, Sandy had, a very good upbringing, which I did have. I had a lot of opportunity given to me, education, a good home life. I was safe. I was, loved by adoptive parents that loved me unconditionally. But again, I want people to know, even though the goal of Canada was to basically beat out the Indian in me, as well as other Aboriginals throughout Canada, they succeeded in my case. Unfortunately though, not everybody was as lucky as I am, or that I was, because one, I'm still alive, two, I'm disease free, I haven't been incarcerated or things like that, whereas a lot of the Aboriginals, to my understanding and from what I've read and heard about and just know, a lot of them, some of them have died of AIDS, died of suicide, are in jail, they've lost their family, they've lost everything. Whereas, yes, I myself have lost my culture, I lost my religion, I lost a sense of who I am. Do I belong here in the white society? Do I belong with my Native people? Just always feeling not ever belonging. And being adopted, most adoptees will tell you, regardless of race, that being adopted is very hard emotionally, because we always have this thing in our head that tells us that we're never good enough. Or for me, I grew up always thinking I was the dirty little Indian girl, that I wasn't worthy of love, I wasn't worthy of friends or people to love me unconditionally. And that's something that kind of, it's just very hard growing up thinking like you're a piece of garbage all your life, or you're dirty, or something's wrong with you and nobody wants you. So all my life, in short, I felt like I was just throwaway garbage. So yeah. My message for me making this video today is because I think it's more of a healing for myself and opening up more and accepting who I really am. Not just, being a medium, but also trying to embrace the Native part of me, which is something that not intentionally, well, at times I did intentionally hide that I was Native American, because growing up in the small town that I did grow up in and in Canada, it's not because the people there in my hometown of Thompson, it's not because it was just an underlining shame in general to be Native. I remember being about 11, 12 years old with my group of friends from elementary school, and they would, you know, the natives would be in the bush, you know, smoking or drinking or, you know, inhaling Lysol or whatever it is that they did. And I remember very vividly, like it happened yesterday, a friend of mine said, you know, because they were kind of bashing on, you know, or talking about, you know, the natives and stuff. And I remember one person had said that, well, Sandy's not one of them. She's, well, they said Sandra, but they said she's not one of them. You know, she's not dirty. She's white, you know. And that really struck a chord in me, because it's like, oh, whew, thank goodness that they don't see me as my own people, you know. And it's not because my adoptive parents raised me to be white. They've always embraced me as Sandra. You know, this is the daughter that we adopted regardless of her situation. They love me unconditionally. And I know, you know, even people to this day that I'm still in touch with from my hometown always hold my mom and dad to a very high standard. And, you know, they praise them for the wonderful job that they did and how unselfish it was of them to adopt me from the circumstance that I was taken from. And to my understanding, I was taken away because it was a bad situation, and that the welfare system took me from my biological family because the situation that I was in with them wasn't the best. And I grew up believing that all my life. And thankfully, my adoptive parents have never said that, you know, they never shamed me for being Native. They never shamed me for being adopted. If anything, they embraced it. Especially my dad, he'd always say, you know, if you ever want to find your biological family, we're here for you. We'll support you. We'll help you find it. We'll hire people to find them for you if you'd like. But it was me. I was so confused, because by them saying that to me, it made me feel like, oh, great. You don't want me either. You know, you adopt me, but now you don't want me. I'm not good enough. So far back as I can remember, I always felt like I wasn't good enough, even with all the unconditional love. And again, any adoptee will tell you the exact same thing. We have that low self-esteem. We have that feeling left out, not a part of. We don't fit in. We don't fit in here. We don't fit in there. So where do we belong? But back to my parents, they've always embraced it. I remember growing up in my home, we always had Indian and Inuit artifacts in our home. They always decorated the house, you know, from birch bark biting pictures to mucklucks to things about the native, you know, my culture, because they've always embraced it. So I want to make that very clear. It's not because my parents were ashamed of who I was. They've always encouraged me to do it. But like I said, because of my friends and, you know, growing up in the small town of Thompson, the Native people, unfortunately, were not very well respected or very well treated. And I didn't want to be a part of that. And I remember being very young, telling everybody I was Puerto Rican or anything but who I was, because being Native was something that you just didn't want to be. So being adopted, I think I was about 3.5 years old when I was adopted from by my mom and dad, Joe and Caroline. And I still remember that as well very vividly, the day that they came to pick me up. They showed up, and I remember there was a gravel driveway and there was like a porch or something. I don't know if it was a house or a trailer, but I remember them pulling up in a Dodge Chrysler, and Joe, my dad, I remember standing outside the door leaning up against it, and he was kneeling in front of me, and he said, "Hi, I'm Joe, and this is Carolyn. We're going to be your new mom and dad." And I just remember looking at him like, who are you? Just being confused, like, what's going on? And looking up at the porch and seeing my foster parents, whom I thought were my mom and dad. And Joan was just crying, and her husband Alan was holding her, and all of a sudden they disappeared into the house. And next thing you know, I'm inside the car, and I'm being driven off, you know, to Thompson from, I believe it was either Swan River or Dauphin. I can't really remember that part. But I just remembered being adopted, and there was an older sibling, not a biological sibling, but I did have an older brother. And I just remember feeling like, I don't know if I like this so much, because I'm no longer the oldest child. I'm no longer the boss. And just feeling very confused. And I also do remember I wasn't really scared. I was just confused to what's going on. But at the same time, I felt safe. I felt like, okay, well, let's go on this adventure and, you know, see what happens, because I didn't really understand. I think I was more upset or confused as to why this woman who I thought was my mother was crying. So, yeah. When I first arrived in Thompson, did I know that I was adopted? Did I know that there was a difference between me and everybody around me? Truthfully, at first, no. I think I was just, you know, adjusting to not being with my foster parents, and I don't really think I had that association that I was never going to see him again. I think I already knew that I would, which I did, but I think I adjusted very well, you know, going from Swan River to Thompson and living with my mom and dad, you know, because they made everything, you know, very welcoming. I had my own room. We lived in a house, you know. I had extreme stability living with them. You know, we did church every Sunday, you know. I went to Sunday school. We had friends that we would, you know, spend time with, family friends, church friends, things like that. So I adjusted very well for the first few years. And it didn't really dawn on me that they were white and I wasn't. It just seemed natural to me and very safe. And I was very happy. You know, I was very shy of cameras and having my picture taken, but I think I was well adjusted. But it wasn't until as elementary school progressed and I got a little older, another incident that happened to me, I think I was in grade 4. This boy asked me when my mom came to pick me up to take me to the dentist, and my mom showed up, you know, being white from Maine, and, you know, he in shock asked me, "Is that your mom?" And I said, "Yes." He goes, "But she's white." And I'm thinking, well, yeah, you know, and I just remember going to the dentist feeling very puzzled. It's like, why is she white? Why am I not white? Even though I wasn't a stupid child, but, even though that's debatable, but I knew that I was Native because, like I had said, my parents have always told me, you know, you're Native American, or Native Canadian, or whatnot, and we're white. So it was always in my vocabulary, always in our conversations growing up, but it was more of the school children, or, you know, that would bring it to my attention that, hey, you're not white, and they are. So what's going on with you? Because I think it was a good learning experience for myself, and I guess for my friends, but it was an awareness that was, at that time, it was very painful to me because I felt, again, once, you know, I felt ashamed again for not being white and having more questions as to why am I not white? What's going on? About that time too that my mediumship abilities, or my abilities, were really starting to develop, because there were things that I was getting and knowing and seeing and feeling, not just about myself but people around me. And even, you know, as late as, you know, the 90s, you know, my employers or people that I worked with would always say, oh, she's in Sandyland again, because I was always tuning out. And some people would say Sandy's clueless, or Sandy's not here, or, you know, truth be told, there was times I was bored with your conversation. But most of the time, instead of looking at you, I was looking around you, above you, or over there somewhere, because I was actually communicating with people's loved ones. At that time, I just thought it was normal. I thought everybody could, you know, do and see what I could see. But it wasn't until I got much older that I realized that not everybody can speak to the dead. And that was another thing that made me feel less than or different than, that something was wrong with me, not just being Native or not being white. I also had to contend with being a medium and trying to figure out what it is that I'm doing and able to see. And some of my elementary school friends that I'm still, you know, friends with now, remember saying that, Sandy, you would always say the craziest things, but everything you said would always happen. And even with my mom, Caroline, when I did come out of the closet, so to speak, at 29 years old, I told her something, you know, I knew something was going to happen, and fortunately it did. And that was my opportunity to say, hey, you know, I'm a medium. And she just kind of smiled and said, now it makes sense, and we know, type thing. And I said, why? And she goes, because when we first adopted you, you were always saying the darndest things, and everything you said would happen exactly like you said. So obviously, knowing that now, I knew I was giving them future readings. But they would ask me, because I would say crazy things like, I chose you, I watched you. And they would ask me, how? What are you talking about? And I would say, well, I was in my mother's belly, and I would watch you through her belly button, and I chose you. And, you know, I think that's profound for me, because knowing that information at such a young age and knowing what I know now, I know it was a so-called past life, or a past life experience, regression, or whatnot. But it's just a part of who I am. And so I guess in essence, you know, just to add a little bit more what it was like growing up Native in a small town, being a medium, and trying to understand who I am. It's not that I didn't have anybody to speak to, but I kind of didn't, because the majority of people that were in my life were all white. And that's just how I grew up. I went to a church that was, you know, mostly white people. Yeah, there were some Natives that did attend there, but they weren't, you know, I just didn't relate to them. I didn't understand, because, again, growing up in a small town, you know, it's not like you gravitated towards, you know, the Native people, because unfortunately they were not respected, or it was almost like taboo to go talk to them or to be near them, or, you know, or anything like that. So I kind of stayed away from them, not because I'm a mean person or anything. It's just because the society and the times that I grew up in, that's just what you did. And being a child, I didn't really know any difference, even though deep down I knew, okay, those are my people. But yeah, I wasn't even accepted by my own people, because from what I understand now, they would look at me as being a traitor, or an apple, which is very derogatory if you're Native, because it's saying that you're red on the out, white on the in. And that was something that always stuck with me, and was extremely hurtful to me, because again, it just reiterated to me that, hey, I'm not white, I'm not Native, I'm not welcome in the white society, I'm not welcome in the Native society, but at the same time I was more welcomed by white than I was by my own people. So to me that was extremely confusing, because I did want to know who I was, but heaven forbid I admitted that, because I was afraid I'd lose my white friends. And again, that's nothing against them either. I think it's basically because we were all young, we were just kids ourselves, and what did we know? We were just going based on what society was deciding what was normal for us to do. So it was very hard for me as I got older to understand and embrace who it is that I was. But also, yeah, it was just very hard. So in short, no, I wasn't treated differently that much by my friends or society in Thompson, and I know now that it's because I was raised white, which now is what's going on in Canada with the 60 scoop and everything. It's they succeeded in beating the white into me because I grew up white. How it affected me as I got older, I became an alcoholic. I started stealing alcohol from friends, and I just started drinking a lot, and I did everything I could to drink every day to shut out the voices that were in my head from dead people or visions that I was getting, and my own thoughts that I was getting about why doesn't anybody love me? Why was I adopted? Why am I not white? Why this? Why that? So it affected me quite bad because my self-esteem went from hardly being there to not being there at all. And I just remember, isolating and running away from people, and because I didn't want to deal with problems. I didn't want to hear how you were going to hurt me, and I would sabotage my relationships because I felt like, well, if I end this friendship or if I end that friendship, that people can't hurt me anymore. So that was the beginning of my sabotaging everything good around me, because I was constantly reminded every day that you're not white, you're not native, you're not welcome here, you're not welcome there, you're an apple. So, even being the age that I am now, it still affects me, and I still sabotage things because I get to that point, well, let me do this so you can't hurt me, and you can't, so I feel like it gives me some sense of control, some sense of stability, that if I break free from you first, you can't hurt me. And the crazy thing about it is, I'm always looking for love. I'm always looking for someone to find me worthy to fight for, because I just never felt like anybody fought for me, because I always grew up believing that if my own biological family didn't want me, because I just thought they threw me away like garbage. I thought I wasn't tall enough, pretty enough, smart enough. I smelled, and I know that sounds crazy, but I always used to think that I smelled, and that's why, well, they didn't want me, but I heard that, later on in life that they had other kids, and I'm like, well, they kept them, but they didn't keep me. My foster family let me get adopted. They didn't keep me. They kept all the other foster kids. So what's wrong with me? I must not be worthy of love. And my spiral into alcoholism began, and putting myself in situations where I could get hurt because I felt like it was a way to punish myself. Because I never felt worthy. And I think that most adoptees would feel that way regardless of race or circumstance, that we'd all have that same ism or characteristic, that we have low self-esteem, or we never feel good enough, regardless of how old we are, and regardless of how we grew up or past or anything like that. In regards to the 60s scoop, no, my adoptive parents never told me about it that I can remember. It wasn't until I was 23 when I finally felt I was old enough and mature enough to handle what was what I would find out. Because even when on my 18th birthday, it was like clockwork. My dad, Joe, was always like, okay, do you want to find them now? And it's like, no, I don't. You know, quit pushing this on me. You know, you're supposed to love me. But, so at 18, I wasn't ready. And I think he asked me again at 20. But I still wasn't ready. And it was weird, because just out of the blue, I decided to do it. And I don't even think I even told them, but I registered with the adoption agency at the Thompson General Hospital in the basement. And I just remember signing the paper, and not even 30 days later, or it was about 30 days later, that I got a letter in the mail, or I got a phone call. I can't remember which was which, but I know I got both. And they said, we found some of your biological family. And I just remember, like, oh my God, like, that was quick, because when I did file with the agency, yeah, you kind of have to go to counseling. They have to see that if you are mature enough, and if you are ready to handle the good or bad or whatever it is that you're going to hear. And I just remember getting the phone call saying that they found them, and I'm just like, that was fast, because they did tell you that it could take days, months, even years, or you never. You know, and is that something I'm going to be willing to accept, that I may never find them, or they may never want me, or this or that, knowing full well, you know, my low self-esteem. Would I be able to handle that, knowing that I was, you know, a still active alcoholic, even though thankfully as I got older, my drinking got less and less. But when I got the phone call, they told me, and I didn't know what to think. I think I was crapping kittens or something, but I think I got more. It was actually the letter that I got. I remember exactly where I was, where I lived, the time of day pretty much. It was early afternoon when I got this letter, and I still have it actually, and from the province of Manitoba, and it said that that they found my biological family, and that there were 9 of us. And in that moment, it's almost like I went into warp speed, and it's like, boom, everything just, you know, made sense to me, because at 9 years old, we were in Swan River visiting friends, and I had told my dad that, yeah, I'm adopted, but I told him at that time that I had 9 siblings. And he told me, no, you don't. You only have, from what we understand from the agency, that you have 1 older brother, and that he was adopted, and that you were taken away from a very bad situation. And that's all they knew. And of course, I took him at face value, and I believed him, and to this day I still do. But when I remember sitting on the floor holding that piece of paper, and it says there's 9 of you, it's like, holy crap, because I knew it at 9 years old, that I had 9 siblings. Even though 4 of them, or 2 of them at least, I don't think were even born at that time, because that was 19, we won't even say when that was, but it was when I was 9 years old. And So that was just another validation of my abilities. Like, wow, I already knew this. It was like an inner knowing. It was my psychic abilities, you know, telling me at that young age that about something I already knew. And in that paperwork, I remember reading, you may be a victim of or a part of the 60 scoop. And I'm thinking, what is that, ice cream? You know, I didn't know what it was. I just like, whatever. I didn't take any, it never registered with me that it was anything except nothing. It didn't affect me. It was like, I was more intrigued by the fact that I knew that there was 9 of us. And it happened very, very quickly, because after receiving that letter and the phone call, next thing you know it, I was going to the Indian reservation, and actually I was going to Winnipeg first to meet the biological family. Looking back on it, I don't think I handled it so well, but I think I handled it the best that I could, considering I was going through it by myself. I didn't have my parents with me or anything like that. I didn't even have my son with me. But I just remember, I think I met them at a restaurant, like Salisbury's House or Salisbury Steakhouse or something like that. And of course I had rules and stipulations, as I don't want the biological father there, because I just felt like he didn't want me. So why should you meet me if you didn't want me? Because that was in my head, that I thought they were the first people that threw me away like trash. So I was willing to meet the siblings. But little did I know until, you know, I think it was months or a year later or something, that he was actually there, and he did see me, because I guess he was hiding. And he did see me. And I think they did bring him in, if I remember. But I just remember looking at them like, wait a minute, they're not white. And they're native. They're like actually real native people. And that's who I am. And I just remember it freaked me out to the point of like, I don't know if I want to be a part of this, because this is a world that I'm not willing to embrace. And what are my friends going to say, or what are my family's going to say? You know, what do I think of this? Because they lived so differently. And I remember talking to my biological sister on the phone, and one of the very first things that she said to me, are you a medium? And I'm like, how does she know? And I said, yes, I am. And she had said, well, we know I'm asking you because none of your other siblings have it, so we know that you had to have it because it runs in your biological family. And the other question she had asked me is if I had a scar, like a tracheotomy scar, on my throat. And I just remember feeling I wanted to hang up or drop the phone or something. It's like, how does she know that? And she goes, because she remembers seeing it on me, and she knew that when I was born that I had the surgery at birth. And so I just remember feeling very violated. It's like, how does she know all this stuff about me when I've never met her? But according to her is that they've always heard about me all their life, but unfortunately I never heard about them. But it wasn't until years later that I realized that, you know, her being my older sister, she still lived on the reservation. She was still very much in touch with the biological family. So everybody knew about me, but I didn't know about any of them. And again, it was another turning point in my life where it's like, again, it's not because I'm racist. It's not because I'm ashamed. But in some essence, I was, because of how I grew up. Not because of my adoptive parents, but because of society. They really made it very difficult for me to naturally embrace who I am, because of the stigma that society had against the Native culture. So to go back to the basement of the Thompson General Hospital, in the counseling services is when I heard about my biological mom who was dead. And I remember thinking, Well, one, I remember running out of the counselor's office and running into the bathroom stall and punching the wall as hard as I can, just so angry and crying. Like I could not stop crying. And then I just stopped myself. It's like, why am I crying over someone I hate, and someone I've never met, and someone who abandoned me, someone who didn't love me enough? And all these thoughts were going in my head, like, I don't love her, I don't like her, I'm glad she's dead. She chose alcohol over me. She chose her other kids over me. So why am I crying over somebody like that? And I just remember being extremely devastated. I couldn't stop crying. My heart was broken and being so confused. And it took me years, but even before that, you know, I know this sounds harsh, but I hated my biological parents because I thought everything else and everybody else and everything was more important to them than me. And thinking that, and then being put into foster care, and then being adopted, and they were the first people that I blamed. Like, why didn't you love me enough? Why did you like alcohol more? Why didn't you fight for me? Why didn't you hunt me down? You know, I have 2 kids of my own. You know, I would walk through fire to find them, to protect them, to be with them. And again, it just made me feel like I wasn't worthy of their love, or they didn't want me. And to me, in my head, they were the first persons to throw me away. But to go back to my biological mother, Lillian, even now I'm surprised I'm saying her name, but I think it's because I'm more mature now and I understand things so much more now. But I couldn't even call her, I couldn't call her that. She was the woman that I hated, or I would call her a name, which I won't repeat. But to me, that's who she was, because I couldn't understand how you could just give up your child. So shortly after finding the news out about my biological mother, and finding about, you know, the 9 siblings, and that my biological family wanted to meet me, and they did register, actually, I guess years ago, before I did. You know, shortly after that, I found myself going to Duck Bay, the reservation that I'm from, Pine Creek First Nation. And I just remember going there thinking, you know, being all excited, is like, oh my God, I'm going to be able to see where I come from. I'm going to see what they look like. Do they going to look like me? Are they going to sound like me? Are they this? Are they that? And I just remember driving up there. I don't even know who drove me or how or anything, but I just remember driving up there, and I started looking around. It's like, where's the mall? Where's this? Why does this house look like this? Why does this house look like that? And just thinking like, wow, this is a real Indian reservation, you know, because, you know, obviously it didn't have teepees and all this stuff, but it was a world that that was so foreign to me. And I remember meeting my biological sister, her husband, and my little niece Samantha, who was, I don't know, she was small, and Brent. I think there was a baby named Brent. I can't remember who came first, Brent or her other son. But I just remember going there, and her house was normal inside, but I remember thinking, why are you talking like that? You don't sound like me. You don't sound white. You sound native. You know, and to me that was a real shock, and it took me back to, you know, it's almost like instantly I flashed back to, well, Sandy's not a dirty little Indian, she's not this, she's not that, and just thinking, well, apparently, you know, that's who I am. Even though they were very clean and very nice, and, you know, I just remember feeling like a fish out of water. I felt so displaced. I felt like my skin was crawling. It's like, I can't be here because I don't relate, I don't understand. You know, I remember they took me to the bush and they were picking berries, and I'm thinking, why are we picking berries when there's a grocery store? Why don't you just go to the grocery store? And then I remember them telling me that they hunt and fish, and it's like, who does that? That's you know, according to my friends now, I make a terrible Indian because I don't believe in hunting and I don't believe in fishing, and again, I don't think that's to any fault of my own. I think it goes back to Canada doing their job to beat out the Indian in me and make me white. But I know it sounds crazy and stuff now, but even saying it, it's like it's just a world that was so unfamiliar to me. It was one that I guess a part of me hoped I wasn't a part of because I didn't understand. But now being older, it's a part of me that I do want to get to know of and to understand and embrace and to know, because my entire life I've been robbed of myself. Like, who is Sandi or Sandra? Who is Sandra Gail Boucher? Who am I? Am I white? Am I native? You know, do I belong here? Do I belong there? I know for me, I don't feel very welcomed by my own people. And I'm not saying anyone in general. I'm just saying by the culture of the Native people in general. Because when I go there, they see me differently, and when I'm with them, I see them differently. We're in two different worlds. Like, we completely we clash. And I'm used to, you know, having, you know, certain things and doing certain things and stuff, whereas their lifestyle and their lives and their beliefs and everything is so much different than mine. And I don't know, all I can say is the 60 Scoop really, they took everything away from me. They took my culture, they took my heritage, they took my religion, they took me away. I feel fortunate though that I'm part of a very small percentage, maybe 0.1% of the people who were adopted and who were, you know, kidnapped and taken away, that had a good life. And the life that I didn't have that was good is because I created it. It's not because my adoptive parents gave me a bad life. They gave me a very good life. And for that, you know, I'm grateful. But to go back to the 60 Scoop, I remember August of 2016, I was telling my boyfriend that I keep hearing this dollar amount in my head of 10,000, and him knowing my abilities, that what I say happens. It's like the amount is 10,000. $10,000. Am I getting 10,000? Do I owe 10,000? You know, what's going on? But as I know, you know, information that I get is revealed in time. So I knew either I'm going to get a nice hefty bill from somebody for $10,000 or 10,000 was going to come to me, but regardless, it was going to make sense. So November 1st came, 2016, and over the years I have been in touch with my biological family via social media, which is has been great. And I remember talking to a biological auntie, and I told her, okay, well, I'm going to write my book, you know, because I'm the worst procrastinator, but I'm going to write my book about myself, what it's like to, you know, be Native American, growing up white, and what we're talking about now. And she had said that I need to contact this attorney because she started talking about the 60 Scoop, and she asked me if I've heard of it, and I said, well, I heard about it from my biological dad, and he said that I was kidnapped and, you know, stolen and sold and this, and I just never believed him, because it just didn't make sense to me, because who kidnaps kids? You know, we're not in the Civil War or something. I just didn't think that, you know, that story was true. I just thought it was a joke. So I never took it seriously. And it was that day, it was actually back to November 1st, she said, she just kept talking about this attorney. So long story short, the next day I get a phone call from an attorney, and then I had a few reporters, you know, call me, and one being from CBC Canada, and we were talking about the 60 Scoop, and she interviewed me and asked me some questions and stuff, and then the attorney told me that I was part of this $2.3 billion lawsuit in Canada against the Canadian government because back in the 60s, hence the 60s scoop, kids that were born in, I think it was 1959 to 1971, they were literally kidnapped and stolen against their will, against their families' will and consent. And some of us were put into a baby catalog, like a Sears catalog for baby for sale, with all the qualifications and our picture there, say, you know, this little Indian girl can do this, this, and this. She can cook. She can do all this stuff for you. And, you know, to me it sounds like slavery, but, you know, whatever. But that the Native kids like myself were in a catalog and labeled kid for sale. And that's where the 10,000 amount came in, because I was told that apparently that's what my going rate was $10,000. I was devastated for 3 days. I couldn't stop crying because, again, it goes back to feeling like garbage. Like, well, damn, I have a price tag. And having a price tag is very demoralizing. It's crushing. It just, again, it was that big wave of, you're a piece of crap, you're not worthy, no one loves you, you're trash, and here's your price tag. Go to a garbage dump. That's how I felt. And nothing anyone could say or do could make me feel better. And I remember I called a childhood friend that I've known since I was 5 years old, and she was 4, and she was crying with me on the phone and said she was so sorry. And to my shock, she had mentioned to me about the 60 scoop too, and little did I know she was always aware of it growing up. And it's like, why didn't you tell me? And she just said, I thought you knew. I'm like, no, I never knew. I didn't know anything. You know, it wasn't until I was 23 that the 60 scoop was first brought to my attention. Maybe my adoptive parents told me, but I don't remember them really saying it. It wasn't until I was 23 is the first time I actually really remember hearing the word 60 scoop. So November 2nd, 2016 is when my world just crumbled around me. Thankfully, I didn't resort back to drinking. But it was very hard. And it's crazy how God's timing works, because ever since I was 26 years old, I've been wanting to write a book called A Time to Heal on what it was like for me growing up. And it's not necessarily a book about, oh, poor me, poor Sandy, you know, poor little Indian girl who grew up white, who had a great life. On the outside, it looked great, but on the inside, I was dying all the time. I was so conflicted because I've been on a search all my life for who am I? Where do I belong? Who loves me? Am I ever going to find love? Am I going to be loved? Are people going to keep throwing me away? And as soon as I get love, I sabotage it because let me screw this up so you can't throw me away either, like I felt like everybody else has done before in the past. Thank you for watching my video biography. That is just a brief look into what my autobiography is going to be about, which will be in a bookstore near you in 2018. I know you will enjoy it. It will be available online and I believe in Barnes & Noble. But you can also check it out on my website at closureandacceptance.com, or you can send me an email or even call or text me to order your book in 2018. Again, thank you so much for watching my video biography, and I hope to be reading some of you all soon, and please remember that they're always with us.